Welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, where bold minds in occupational therapy meet big ideas. I'm Anya O'Dea.
And I'm Jen Tretchek. And in this season of the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, each week we're going to sit down with leading OTs, entrepreneurs and thought leaders from Ireland and abroad who are pushing boundaries, building new paths, solidifying and reshaping what it means to be an occupational therapist today.
From startups to social impact, leadership to lifelong learning, if you are thinking beyond traditional practice, you're in the right place.
So strap in for season 5 of the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast.
Hi Rhiannon, and welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapist podcast. We are delighted to have you here today. Rhiannon, you're based in Australia and you are the owner and director of the Lifestyle Movement, and you have your own podcast as well in Australia, and you're known for so many pieces. But I think the piece that where I certainly would know you most from is your role around advocacy in occupation as lifestyle medicine and promoting the importance of that. So I don't want to talk too much about you because I think you're going to give a much better introduction. So would you like to tell us a little bit about you and your practice and where you're at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. This is very exciting. Look, I became an occupational therapist pretty much straight after I finished school. I went to uni and wanted to become an OT. I fell in love with this idea of helping people improve their quality of life. I remember hearing that and I was just like, yes, like that is what I want to do. I don't really know what OT means, but I want to help improve people's quality of life. And so I dabbled in quite a few different things. I worked in a hospital. I actually came over to England and worked at St. Thomas's Hospital opposite the Big Ben there. I've worked in work rehab. I worked in peds at a special development school. And then I sort of just stayed in peds. I had an opportunity where I was on maternity leave and I didn't have a job to go back to, thinking, what am I going to do? And there are a lot of sort of sliding door moments. My husband just said, why don't you start your own business? And I was like, babe, I couldn't possibly start my own business. I have no idea about business. And I've only been working with kids for 8 months. He said, just do it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I was very nervous and very naive and didn't really know what I was doing. But I knew if I just started small and took the first step, that the work would lead the way. And so I started off with one client and I gradually built up my caseload from there. But it was just that confidence in knowing that when I saw one person and I could help try and solve some problems and collaborate and co-create with them to support them to engage in those meaningful occupations, that I could sort of work my way through that to support other people. And my confidence sort of grew from there. And I didn't start a brick and mortar business. I just had my own mobile practice. So everything was in the boot of my car, all the resources, all the toys. You know, every weekend when I go do the grocery shopping, I could never fit anything in because my car boot was already full of all the toys, and the kids would be crammed in the back seats with all the shopping on top of their laps. And that's sort of how I've lived for the last, 15 years, I think. But now I get online shopping, which is a blessing. But yeah, and I just, as I've gotten older and wiser and sort of looked more into occupational therapy, I really started to love it more, because there was a point where I did want to give up. I felt like I was disillusioned. I felt like I wasn't doing that OT work that I really wanted to do when I signed up to the profession, like improving people's quality of life. I felt like some of the soul had sort of been sucked out of my work, and it was just the daily to-dos and keeping up with the KPIs. So, I went on a whole journey of finding myself in occupational therapy again.
Because you did a film about that, and it's so inspiring listening to, I suppose, your honesty around that journey, and then kind of how you refound the value and kind of used your values to kind of reset and figure out the direction. But you also got to speak to some of the greats in occupational therapy who are still around, and kind of finding out from them more about, you know, what inspired them and the models. What was that like, making that film?
It was amazing. I really loved the process. And one of the things that I've loved about OT is the community. So I've loved connecting through the OT Lifestyle Movement podcast with more occupational therapists who are doing incredible things, like what I'm sure you guys are, you know, talking to incredible OTs across the world as well. And you just learn so much. And then also talking to occupational therapists and professors who have really walked the path before us. They're the giants, and here we are standing on their shoulders, you know, they're passing the baton to us. And I really feel like it's our time now. Like, what can we create? What's our vision for occupational therapy? Where do we see it going in the future? Because we are the current occupational therapists who can create our own revolution. And we need to hold the vision for that. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, is this intersection between occupational therapy, identity, and purpose. Because I feel like I've found mine. I feel like a spark has been reignited in me after a long time of sort of, you know, you could call it burnout or just misalignment. Like, I just felt so misaligned in my work. You know, it's just going to work Monday to Friday, Groundhog Day every day, and not really finding meaning in my work, you know, not really celebrating the small wins, not really caring too much. And it wasn't meaningful. And I think that's just so ironic, because here we are as occupational therapists trying to inject meaningful occupations into other people's lives. But here I was just not having my own meaningful occupations, particularly as it related to work. So it's something I became passionate about, and I just really enjoyed coaching other OTs, supporting them in this space, and sort of being a voice and a platform for what's possible and the potential of occupational therapy.
Brilliant. It's really interesting when you say that, because the research time and time again for occupational therapists and all other health professionals as well points to this piece around, like, what are the coping factors, or what supports our resiliency to work in these demanding, helping, supporting roles. And it comes back to pieces around professional identity, job satisfaction, and often it's overlooked. It's overlooked in that people think about, like, you know, salary, grade, status, where actually we need to be looking at professional identity and satisfaction in our roles.
Yeah, 100%. I think occupational therapists, we have a very interesting, you know, time with our professional identity. I think because sometimes, and I'm not going to say all the times, because I think we are, as a profession, becoming more well-known. Like, our role is becoming more well-known. When people hear our job title, they will sort of get a gist of what it is that we do. But still, there is this underlying feeling that the general public don't understand what we do. And this obviously feeds into our lower self-esteem and confidence, and that around our own professional identity, which makes it really hard, because we feel less valued. We feel less heard. We feel like we're getting less referrals. We feel like we're not doing that meaningful work because no one knows what it is that we do. And so what I see a lot of occupational therapists do is they're not using the O word, right? They're not using occupation. Instead, they will replace it for task or activity. And this can be in, you know, case notes. It can be in team meetings. It can be when we're just talking to anyone about what we do, you know, and I'm totally guilty of this too. Like, I would totally substitute occupation for task and activity, because people know what it means. We don't have to try and explain occupation. You know, how many times have we tried to say an elevator pitch around what occupation is and stuff it up or fumble on our words? Like, me all the time. And my definition is constantly changing and evolving, and it changes all the time, like, you know, from day to day. But I think I think we do need to reclaim our identity. And when I talk about this, I think it really talks to reclaiming occupation. You know, this is the medicine. Occupation is the medicine. Occupation is the medicine for so many things. Like, this lies at the heart of our profession. So we need to embrace it. We need to be proud of it and really advocate for it, and stand proud.
Absolutely.
You've, within the lifestyle movement, you do a lot of work with occupational therapists and kind of coaching support for OTs, Rhiannon. What kind of, I mean, mindset blocks, you kind of touched on it there, but, you know, what are the things that are holding OTs back, or how do you support them to move beyond that kind of maybe discomfort with owning our identity?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think OTs already know. I think it is just verbalizing it and talking about it more. I think that's the hard thing. You know, the catch-22 is people don't know what we do because we don't talk about occupation, but we don't talk about occupation because people don't know what we do. And so we're in this continuous cycle where we kind of get stuck. And I think the more that we talk about it, the more that we raise our collective voice, the more that it's going to make sense to people. Occupation is our culture. Our work revolves around occupation. Occupation is in our title. We need to own it. And so I think that's one of the biggest things, is just raising that collective voice and not being afraid to talk about occupation. And I think something else that I love to talk about is this idea of occupation as a means and as an end in therapy. So as occupational therapists, our goals are always occupation based. So we're always looking at what it is that person wants to engage in, what meaningful, purposeful activity do they want to engage in. And something that sort of gets left behind, particularly in the medical model systems, is this idea of occupation as a means. So this is using occupation as the therapeutic modality. So using occupation in the therapy process. We're not just doing exercises. We're not just doing rote learning things. We're actually using meaningful occupations to support the end goal, which is also engagement in occupation. The occupation in the therapeutic space doesn't have to be the same occupation as the end goal. There's got to be something that's supporting that person to move towards that end goal. So I think when we not only talk about it, but also lead it and live it and share about it, I think this embodiment and this integration is like the greatest gift that we can give the world, is just, is doing the work.
Absolutely. And you know, when you describe that there as occupation as a means, but also as an end, it's the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're engaging and doing more. It's so interesting when you say about owning our identity and owning our language, because there's a lot of research now published on participation. And of course, it's an incredible outcome that we need to be looking at and means. But there was a paper published way back in 2017 by Christine Imms and colleagues looking at participation as a means and an end. And we've always done this for years, occupational participation. And participation is an interdisciplinary concept now. But if we don't own our own language, we'll get diluted out into this generic piece. And actually, we are the long-standing experts with regard to occupational engagement and participation. And we need to be leading and at the front of that and not losing some along the way, that it's just being, not that it's being diluted, but it's just being absorbed into other areas. And they're advancing the practice and not us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so interesting. Where was that published? What sort of
It was that's a highly cited article. It is so highly cited. So I'll send on the link to you. We can put it in the podcast notes. But Christine Imms is an Australian-based researcher and works with a large group of interdisciplinary therapists. So their first piece was they actually did a systematic review looking at what does participation mean as a concept. So they reviewed, I think it was well over 100 articles, and then they developed this new framework on participation as a concept, and they developed the family of participation related constructs. And then within that, they really break it down so that you can be very clear around, yes, I'm working on with participation as a means. So we're engaging whatever we're doing. But because their framework broke it down so much, you could then identify the outcome or the end point. What was it? So, yes, we're doing this, and the outcome that we aim to achieve is greater social connection, or the outcome
Mm-hmm.
is greater self-esteem and self-efficacy. So it's a fabulous paper for anybody to read, and I'm nearly sure it's open source. So with the link, anybody can look at it.
I think there's a challenge when you're in a service or an area where you can't work in that occupationally focused, meaningful way that you want to be able to work in. And that can really lead to overwhelm, feeling distressed, stressed, kind of falling out of love with occupational therapy, as you mentioned you nearly did. And I know that you've done a lot of work with colleagues then on a kind of a model of occupational therapy that kind of looks at how can we avoid that kind of burnout experience. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about that, Rhiannon?
Yeah. So I'll take you back. I'll rewind the clock a little bit. So it was about a year ago, and it was a Sunday. I was having this magical day out on the ocean in my boat with my family, and we were out whale watching, and it was just a magical day. Like these huge mammals diving and backflipping next to us in the boat. And I just remember getting home thinking, like, that was amazing. Like, I just had this inner fire within me. I was so lit up. I was so alive. And I got home, obviously Sunday evening rolls around, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got school lunches to do. I've got to finish the laundry. I've got all these other things that I need to prepare for the week ahead. And that night I remember looking on Facebook, and I remember seeing yet another post from another occupational therapist who was talking about burnout, who wanted to quit the profession and go work in a cafe because it'd be easier and stress-free, and they just wanted to hang up their boots. And it really got to me because it's not the first time I've seen that kind of post. I see it all the time. I get DMs all the time. And I just thought there's just got to be a better way. Like, I was still on this high from being out on the water. And so I thought about it for a while, and I just wrote this post. I sort of compiled some images and footage of me out on the boat that day, and the whales and the seals and the dolphins and the turtles that I saw. And I put it into a reel. I put some cool music to it. And in the reel, I wrote about this idea of burn in. I just said, let's burn in before we burn out, reignite our inner flame. And I said a few things, not thinking too much of it. I look at the post a bit later on that night, and people were loving it. I had all these comments. I had DMs saying, did you come up with this idea of burn in? I've never heard it before. Can I use it? And I was like, oh, like I honestly didn't think much of it. And it wasn't even ChatGPT generated. Like, it was truly like authentic and from the heart. And I was like, oh, okay, there might be something in this. And so I Googled burn in, and all that came up was, there's nothing on burn in the way that I was looking at it. It was all about screen burn in. So when you have your computer screen on the same static image for too long, the colors discolor the computer screen. And I was like, so there's nothing about burn in. I was like, oh, I might make it a thing. Like, I think there's something in this term, this literacy, this language that I could create. And it's funny, I've always wanted to create a model of occupational therapy. I remember like maybe 7 years ago now, like sitting down, sketching some things out, and nothing sort of came from that. But it's sort of always been in the back of my mind for some reason. It's like, I might create a model for occupational therapists who are burning out. And instead of burnout, I want them to realign to burning in. And at the time, I really didn't know what burn in meant, but I knew what it felt like. It was just this feeling of being alive, of being lit up, of enjoying life. And And so I put this message out to the OT community through my newsletter saying, hey, does anyone want to join me on this venture and this idea? And I think I had about 80 people say yes. I think about 20 of those came to 8 weeks of calls that we had. And we created the burn-in model. And basically this model it's a model based on a metaphor of a fire. So if you can imagine a flame, there are 2 parts of the flame. And the inside part of the flame is doing, being, and belonging. And what it represents is literally alignment. So we need alignment between these 3 things, alignment between who we are, what we do, and who and what we're connected to. And when there's alignment between these 3 things in our inner flame, we have this outer flame that grows bigger and stronger. And this is our becoming. So we all have this potential. The greater the alignment between those 3 things, the doing, the being, belonging, the greater potential for our authentic becoming. And then we have different parts of the ecosystem of the model. You know, we've got the sticks and the logs. That's our fuel for the fire. So they represent occupational factors. Like, what are your meaningful occupations that we can, you know, throw the sticks on the fire, or the big logs that are really going to be sustainable and long burning for our own alignment in our life. We've got the wind and the rain. These are environmental factors. So the rain could be torrential. Like, you might be in a toxic workplace. You might have toxic relationships in your life. And it's just got this torrential downpour. And so your flame is naturally, it's going to fade. It's going to dim down. It might completely burn out. And when you're in a state of burnout, this is represented by coal. And unfortunately, there are a lot of occupational therapists who are in this state. And it's just so motivating for me to get this model out there to support people to, you know, it's not a cure. It's not a fix. It is literally self-awareness. It is bringing awareness to where you are in your season of life, and working out the next steps, working out how, okay, this is where I am currently, you know, identifying that I've got coal, I'm burnt out, my smoke signal's gone, which is, you know, the smoke signal represents, you know, I'm heading towards burnout. It's your burnout signal before your flame fully dims out. And it's looking at these different elements to identify, you know, how can I go from where I am now to where I want to be, which is burning in. When you're burning in, your flame is big and bright and it is blazing and you are lit up. And really, when I think about this flame, like, I literally think about it living inside my heart space. So I feel like it's this very soulful, spiritual model. And and it really does draw on the coaching approach. You know, when we think about how coaching supports someone to go from where they are now to where they want to be, this is such a perfect model to assess from a baseline perspective, do post assessments. It can be for yourself, it can be in supervision sessions, it can be used with clients. There are so many ways, and there's a lot of depth and nuance and complexity to it, but that gives you a bit of an overview.
Really nice visual model. Like, I really like the Kawa for that same reason, that it's very visual and you can kind of see it. But this is a really lovely way to formulate. And the bit that you haven't mentioned that I really like is the embers of being your gifts to the world. You know, when you're fire and when you're lit up, that then you're able to give something back as well. And I think it's just so lovely to have that really nicely visually represented, but really using our language in a really meaningful way.
Yeah, I love the embers as well, because we all have these gifts. We all have gifts to give to the world, whether it's our kindness, our whether we volunteer, whether it's just our listening ear, you know, whatever it is, whatever our strengths are. You know, we picture this as these little embers that flick off the flame and that can go off and drift in the wind to go light someone else's flame. And it is a really beautiful model.
Gosh, what an amazing way to encourage people to think about occupation focused and occupation based practice. Because for me, when you were describing that, it just made me think back of jobs that I've done when I worked as an OT that I've loved, where I've been in my element. And they were the ones where I was doing loads of occupation. I was out in the community. I was doing life skills. I was doing, going on the bus with people, all real occupation based interventions. And it's like, if we might struggle to use our professional identity language, but this piece around actually what lights you up, what actually gives you confidence and esteem, I think it might be a lovely model and framework in our practice to maybe encourage people to use some of our language a little bit more as well.
Yeah, 100%. And even within the burn-in model, so the co-creator of the burn-in model is Michelle Lukan, and she said to me, the burn-in model asks such a better question. So often we say, how are you? And our standard response is, oh, I'm good, or not bad. But with the burn-in model, when you say, how's your flame burning, or how's your flame today? It opens up so much opportunity to really dive deep into what's going on for a person in their life, because you're not running on autopilot. You're not giving a standard, yeah, I'm not bad. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. You're saying like, oh, my flame's dim right now, or I'm lit up. I'm fired up, baby. It's just amazing how you can really change the conversation just by the simple question that you ask. And again, it can come back to this occupational coaching approach.
Yeah.
Rhiannon, you're offering some
and
training
when you say that
on
as
the model?
Yes. Yeah. So we've got a free webinar coming up. So I'm not sure when this podcast will be aired, but there is a free webinar coming up on Monday, but the replay will be available. And we do have some episodes out on the OT Lifestyle Movement podcast explaining the burn-in model, the origins and the elements. And then we also have a 6-week journey. So this is a space where we're holding for occupational therapy professionals who are feeling burnt out, who know that there's more to life and really want to embrace it more boldly, more authentically, and live in alignment. This is what the burn-in model really looks at. The fire itself, although we look at the doing, being, belonging, it's alignment, because it's alignment between those three things. When we're misaligned, that's when we're not living our most authentic and best life that we can. So the journey should be fun, and it's just really about holding space, and it will be providing that coaching support as you move through the model.
Amazing. We're really looking forward to it. I know I have signed up to the webinar. I won't make it just of time, but I'm really looking forward to actually listening back in, because it's a bank holiday on Monday and I won't be up at 12 o'clock in the morning.
No, and you know what? We really want OTs to embrace it. Like, we have such big visions. Michelle and I have such big visions for this model. Our visions are bigger than occupational therapy. Like, we want to start with OTs because this is where the model was born, and we want OTs to adopt it and embrace it and love it as much as we do. But we really feel like it's a model that so many professions can use. We really believe it's a model that anyone can use. You don't need to be a professional to use the model or implement the model. It's very intuitive. It very much makes sense. Like, once you see it, you can't forget it. And so, we've got some big dreams and visions for this. And I really feel like it will raise the profile of the occupational therapy profession. So that's part of our mission as well.
Rhiannon, thank you so much for sharing that with us, for doing all the work to bring all of these ideas together in a really helpful way. And it does really feel it's just the beginning. We'd love to get you back further down the track to talk about it in some more depth, if that's okay. But really appreciate your time today and talking to us about this.
Yeah, thanks guys. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. Thanks so much for listening. If today's conversation sparked an idea, challenged your thinking, or made you feel seen, we'd love if you shared it with a friend or colleague.
Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a chat with the people who are shaping the future of occupational therapy in Ireland and beyond. You can follow us on Instagram or drop us a message. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, take care and keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible within occupational therapy.